This is Tina Douglas, and you're listening to the Liam Photography Podcast with your host, my husband, Liam Douglas. Enjoy!
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Liam here, and this is episode 488 of the Liam Photography Podcast for the week of January 8th, 2026. And this week, copyright test, fake Kodak cards, Ricoh GR series, and more. So let's go ahead and get into our first story for this week. An appeals court upheld a verdict clearing celebrity tattoo artist Kate Von D of copyright infringement over her use of a photographer's image of Miles Davis. However, two judges used the ruling to question whether the long-standing legal test for determining when one creative work copies another remains valid. In July, photographer Jeffrey Sedlick asked the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit to erase the 2024 verdict that Von D's tattoo, partly traced from his photo of the jazz legend, wasn't similar enough to be considered copyright infringement. In 2021, Sedlick filed a first-of-its-kind lawsuit accusing Von D of infringing on his copyright by using his iconic 1989 photo of Davis for a tattoo on her friend Blake Farmer that she inked free of charge for him. On January 2nd, the Ninth Circuit declined to overturn the jury's decision, writing that doing so would require the judges to replace the jurors' judgment with their own, something the court says it cannot do. As a result, the verdict in Von D's favor remains in place. However, the ruling went further than a simple affirmation. Two judges on the panel issued separate concurring opinions agreeing with the outcome in Sedlick's copyright case, but strongly criticizing the legal test that led to it. Both judges questioned whether the Ninth Circuit's decades-old intrinsic test, also known as the total concept and field test, should continue to be used at all. The, quote, total concept and field test asks whether two works appear so similar overall that an ordinary person would think one was copied from the other. Rather than comparing specific elements in detail, the test focuses on the overall impression of the work, such as their mood, style, and general appearance. According to a report by Copyright Lately, Judges Kim Wardlaw and Anthony Johnston each wrote concurring opinions and joined one another's reasoning, arguing that the intrinsic test is deeply flawed. Judge Wardlaw writes that the test should be reconsidered entirely, while Judge Johnstone concludes that a test that produces such a result cannot be right. Judge Wardlaw explains that the test offers juries very little guidance. Because expert testimony is not allowed and detailed analysis is discouraged, jurors must decide complex questions such as how similar a photograph and a tattoo are in Sedlick's case, without clear instructions on how to separate protectable creative choices from elements that cannot be copyrighted, like a person's facial features or pose. She adds that this problem can place copyright holders at a disadvantage. An ordinary observer may assume that works created in different media, such as a photograph and a tattoo, will naturally feel different, even if meaningful copying of the expressive element has occurred. This is especially difficult when a photographer's originality lies in subtle choices involving lighting, angle, or composition applied to a human subject. Judge Johnstone writes that the test has become standardless and largely unworkable over time. He traces its origin to earlier Ninth Circuit cases and explains that it was originally meant to protect creative combinations of unprotected elements. In his view, that purpose has eroded, making it extremely difficult for copyright holders to succeed even in strong infringement claims. Copyright Lately reports that Sedlick will almost certainly seek en banc review, which would mean asking a larger group of Ninth Circuit judges to rehear the case because of its broader legal importance. The publication notes that whether the full court will agree to take the case is uncertain. While the verdict in Von D's favor stands in Sedlick's case, Copyright Lately describes the situation as a potential turning point. The news outlet notes that many copyright scholars have long criticized the total concept and field test as an unreliable way to assess infringement. With 2 Ninth Circuit judges now expressing those concerns in published opinions, the case highlights growing pressure to rethink how courts evaluate similarity in copyright cases. And I thought this was definitely an interesting one to touch on for this week because there has been a lot of various copyright cases brought before various courts over the last few years, and they are also intriguing. Now, I have considered the possibility of seeing if I can get the Law Tog, which is a photographer or lawyer in New York City, to come on the show and talk about this in a little more depth, but I have to reach out to her, which I have not done as of yet, so I do kind of need to get on the stick about that, so to speak. It's no secret that Eastman Kodak will license its branding to pretty much anyone, and one recent example of this is a series of Kodak-branded storage and memory cards. They promise some very impressive performance at a fraction of the cost of major brands. So what's the catch? I first came across these memory cards on Threads, where photographer Gene Perez said he picked one up because the price was just so appealing. These Kodak-branded cards are very affordable, so I can understand why he was willing to give them a shot. Plus, even though Kodak obviously isn't manufacturing memory cards, there is something to be said about the brand name and the trust it carries, despite the fact that it is pretty well known that the brand is licensed out like we give out candy on Halloween. These cards are available on Amazon, Walmart, and Wish. That's a red flag straight away. More on that later. And the 1 terabyte version is just $179. To put that in perspective, Pergear's 1 terabyte CF Express card is $257, and that's a bargain brand, while Lexar and Delkin devices ask $450. OWC Atlas Ultra and ProGrade digital cards cost $480. Going with Kodak, or at least what appears to be Kodak, means being able to buy 2 or 3 cards for the price of 1 from the competition. Part of the reason these cards are so much cheaper is likely due to the dated format they're using. Looking at the peak speed performance, they promise 1800 megabits per second read speeds and 1400 megabits per second write speeds. The Kodak cards are operating on the older CF Express 2.0 specification. Still, since no camera is currently equipped with CF Express 4.0 contacts, the speed boost from 2 to 4 only applies to memory card readers attached to a computer. That probably doesn't matter to many who would use them. With the price as low as it is, it probably sounds too good to be true, and there is reason to believe that it is. To understand that, though, it's important to first dig through the nesting doll company situation that these cards are created under. Firstly, Dexon in France is the company with the license to the Kodak brand name for memory products. Dexon then appears to have sub-licensed it to FuturePath Technology, a Shenzhen, China-based memory manufacturer. The good news is that FuturePath Technology is a proper Compact Flash Association member, meaning they have access to the right licenses and technology to legitimately manufacture cards. The bad news is that the company isn't playing by all the rules of that relationship. While it doesn't apply to its CF Express Type B cards, FuturePath Technology is labeling its Type A cards with the Video Performance Guarantee VPG logo, advertising them as VPG 200 verified. That is a lie, as there is no reference to FuturePath, Dexon, or Kodak on the approved VPG list, and the CFA confirms to Petapixel that it has no record of any of those brands even applying for VPG certification. This is exactly the same shady behavior that Petapixel pointed out 2 years ago, where brands were faking the firmware flag for VPG 200 to trick Sony cameras into thinking they had gone through the proper channels when they in fact had not. Remember, Sony requires VPG 200 verification to access certain video modes on certain cameras, So many brands were faking this flag to avoid going through proper verification, which is time-consuming and required that the cards actually perform in extreme circumstances. By skipping this step, the cards could be sold for much cheaper and their performance isn't actually guaranteed. And when these cards fail, good luck getting any recompense or even a response from the parent companies. 6 months after Petapixel's report on fake VPG verification, the industry largely cleaned up. Still, there are outliers, and Kodak is among them. Memory brands, specifically those in China, regularly try to skirt the rules. Lying to customers is worth it to make a buck, apparently. Perez says that in his limited testing, he hasn't found any issues with the Kodak branded CF Express Type B cards, and that tracks. In his Nikon ZR camera, it's unlikely that he is pushing these cards to the limit. Beyond that, cards like these Kodak branded ones will unlikely fail up front. Instead, it is more likely they will not last as long, failing a photographer or filmmaker after being used for a few months or a year. Failures can be as hard to spot as a dropped frame or two in high frame rate video clips to catastrophic full-on card failure that locks a user out of access to anything on it. Given the low price and the demonstrated willingness to straight up lie to consumers, it's very unwise to put faith in cards like this. I said before that Kodak cards being available on Wish was a red flag, and that's because the memes around Wish are memes for a reason. That's not a reputable place to buy anything. If a company is willing to lie about VPG verification, you have to ask yourself what else it's willing to lie about and what other corners it is cutting to get its asking price down to a fraction of the competition. It never ceases to amaze me how often photographers and videographers will purchase a nice high-end camera and then proceed to put in the cheapest memory card they can find and cross their fingers. Memory is the single most important aspect of any camera system, and yet photographers will regularly choose to cheap out on that aspect straight away. It's maddening. Your camera is only as good as what it is recording to. I get trying to save money, but if you're going to spend the cash on a nice camera, spend the requisite amount to make sure you can actually keep what it records. And I thought this was another good story to touch on this week because there's been a lot of proliferation of these fake memory cards, knockoff memory cards, copycat, stuff like that. So it's always something you want to be aware of and look out for, especially when you're buying memory cards online, just for your own peace of mind. Ricoh Imaging approaches the design of its camera series with a very specific set of principles. That's why the general look, feel, and function of the GR series of cameras hasn't dramatically changed over the years. Talking with Ricoh Imaging President Yasumoto Mori and Kazunobu Saki, General Manager of Ricoh Imaging's Camera Business Division, it's clear those principles will not be sacrificed. Quote, "Our principles for GR are the golden rules," Saki says, speaking to Petapixel at the GR space in Brisbane, Australia. Quote, One GR should always be with you. That is compactness, pocketability. 2, quick response. GR should always capture what you want. 3, GR should have high image quality. And the fourth principle is evolving. So as long as the first 3 principles are kept, we always want to add something new. One of the GR4's evolutions is the connectivity with GR World, the new app that will provide additional value adds. Sakai says these principles are hard and fast and the company won't stray from them. Quote, "We don't soften on these rules," end quote. Still, Ricoh listens to feedback and tries to do its best to balance customer desires with its core principles. Quote, "We have many events where we get to listen to our end users and we get a lot of comments, including criticisms and complaints, as well as a lot of appreciation," Sakai says, adding that GR spaces around the world are especially helpful for speaking with end users. It is through these conversations that Ricoh receives feedback on what users think the company should change about a GR camera, especially over the last few years where the expectation of the GR4 launch was reaching a fever pitch. Of those photographers, most often asked for three things: weather sealing, a flash, and a viewfinder. But to address these issues, Ricoh GR would have to compromise on one of the major design principles: compactness. Quote, "To be frank, we tested weather sealing before starting the GR4 development, but that definitely makes the model bigger. Additionally, sealing materials traps heat inside the camera, making heat management another challenge. To address this, we would then have to make the camera bigger or reduce the speed at which the camera can capture photos. Both of those are against our concept of snap shooting. In that way, we are trying to balance customer demands, but we always give priority to keeping our GR concept. The same can be said of a viewfinder. Quote, "We understand that users want a viewfinder and would recognize that this is a good idea, but we have chosen to stick to our principles and not change our concept. If we decided to add a viewfinder, the camera would become bigger," Sakai explains. When it comes to a flash, Ricoh Imaging made sure to address concerns regarding the GR4's ability to shoot in low light and expanded expression capabilities with an optional flash. Quote, "Shooting performance under dark conditions is much improved on the GR4 because the SR function is much more accurate by 2 exposure value levels. So this is okay, but still people still want to have a flash," Sakai says. To that end, Ricoh Imaging worked hard to create a compact external flash that would allow photographers to enjoy the unique look of flash photography without compromising the compactness principle. Quote, "If we allow ourselves to make the camera a bit bigger, we can do many things, but we don't prioritize that because GR should always be with you and compactness is a key to that," Sakai says. So while Ricoh Imaging does plan to continue to evolve the GR, the eventual GR5 will only change insofar as it abides by the 4 principles Sakai outlines. That means that there are many aspects of the Ricoh GR that photographers can expect will never change, and to that, Ricoh Imaging, that's a good thing. And I thought this was an interesting story. I do agree with their principles on maintaining the core principles of their design choice for the camera, I guess you could say. And Fujifilm has done something very similar. I mean, look at their X100 line. They're up to the X100 version 6, and the overall design of the camera has never changed. Now, the technologies have improved, especially with the 23mm f2 lens. Some of the earliest versions of the lens were fairly soft, and the newer generation that I believe started with the 4 or 5 is where they reinvented the lens basically and made it so much better. So I can definitely understand where Ricoh's coming from as far as that goes. All right, I'm going to take a break right here and then I'll be right back. We hope you're enjoying this episode of the Liam Photography Podcast. You can visit the homepage for the show at liamphotographypodcast.com for show notes and links. You can post your questions, comments, or requests for future episodes at the Liam Photography Podcast Facebook group, or you can also email them to the show at liam@liamphotographypodcast.com. You can find the show on Twitter and Instagram at LiamPhotoATL. You can tweet the show, just insert the hashtag LiamPhotoPodcast. And now, back to the show. And we are back. Fujifilm Japan has announced the Instax Mini Evo Cinema camera, a unique take on the Evo series that focuses on capturing short videos, but also combines that with the ability to shoot photos and make prints. The Evo series is Fujifilm's combination of digital and instant print cameras. Previous iterations allowed photographers to take digital photos and print them out of the camera, which is basically the same experience as a standard instant camera. The difference is that because it's a digital sensor, the photos it produces are more akin to a digital photo printer than, say, a Polaroid, and therefore generally allow it to connect to a smartphone and print photos from a user's camera roll as well. The Evo Cinema camera takes the next logical step in leveraging that digital sensor by making video an option. Quote, the Mini Evo Cinema can capture both still images and videos. It converts captured video data into a QR code and creates an Instax print together with a still image cut out from the video, allowing users to, quote, hand over a video, Fujifilm Japan explains. Quote, by turning videos into Instax prints, users can not only preserve memorable moments spent with loved ones in tangible form, but also easily revisit the video anytime via the QR code. By holding down a trigger located on the camera handle, users can record video clips separately until a full 15-second clip is created. The camera can then print a photo with a QR code on it, which when scanned takes the viewer to a web page to view the whole clip. Because video is a major feature of this camera, the body features a vertical grip design that the company says is inspired by the Fujica Single 8 camera that was originally introduced in 1965. On the side of the camera is a dial that Fujifilm calls the Ursa dial, which the company says changes the effect of the video capture to one that is inspired by those particular periods of time. Each effect has 10 adjustable levels, offering a total of 100 possible expressions, the company says. Quote, these effects capture the unique flavor of each era, letting users shoot extraordinary special videos and still images with a sense of time travel, Fujifilm adds. And as with other Evo cameras, the Mini Evo Cinema also functions as a smartphone printer. Fujifilm is also releasing a dedicated app for the new camera that allows clips to be combined into a maximum 30-second clip, as well as add other effects such as text to prints. The Mini Evo Cinema camera includes the main camera body, a viewfinder attachment, a grip attachment to make it easier for those with larger hands to hold, and a camera case. The camera will be available in Japan starting January 30th of 2026. Pricing and international release windows were not revealed. And I thought this was interesting because I know the Instax cameras from Fujifilm have been extremely popular over the last few years, and I think it's really cool that Fujifilm has decided to add video capabilities to one of these cameras as the next level of development. I think that's really awesome. It's 2026 and Canon has been making full-frame EOS R series mirrorless cameras since 2018. That has not stopped Chinese lens company Ricoh from releasing a new 85mm f1.8 Mark II lens for Canon EF mount DSLR cameras, which seems strange at first glance, but is actually a clever way to bypass Canon's restrictions on third-party full-frame RF lenses with autofocus. Compared to the original 85mm f1.8 SE Mark I released in 2018, the new Ricoh 85mm f1.8 Mark II promises improved image quality, faster autofocus speed, a closer minimum focusing distance, and reduced chromatic aberrations. In fact, the new EF lens makes all the same promises and offers the same features as the Ricoh 85mm f1.8 Mark II lens released for full-frame Sony, Nikon, and L-mount cameras in November. The lens weighs about 346 grams or 12.2 ounces, accepts 62mm front filters, has an 11-bladed aperture diaphragm, and can focus as close as 0.65 meters or 2.1 feet. The Ricoh 85mm f1.8 Mark II features 11 elements arranged across 7 groups. Canon mirrorless owners were, of course, left out of the equation in November. Canon has infamously restricted its Canon EOS R system, preventing third-party full-frame RF mount lenses from having autofocus. Ricoh has barked up this tree before with its 85mm f1.4 Portrait Prime in 2023, but the attempt ultimately failed. Petapixel even got its hands on some of these banned lenses. While Canon relented and has allowed third-party AF lenses for APS-C cameras into the market, it has remained steadfast in its refusal to permit full-frame lenses. Instead of trying the same thing it did in 2023 with the 85mm f1.4 lens, Ricoh is taking a different tack with this redesigned 85 f1.8 Mark II Prime for mirrorless cameras. Instead of making the lens an RF mount, the company is releasing it for Canon EF DSLR cameras, but heavily advertising its EF to RF adapter, which not only includes a control ring like Canon's own RF lenses, but enables autofocus capabilities on full-frame Canon mirrorless cameras. Restrictions be damned. The Ricoh 85mm f1.8 Mark II for Canon EF mount costs $229.99, just like its mirrorless siblings. However, available bundles with the MR-EFTR-A or MR-EFTR-B adapters increase the price to $239 or $269 respectively. The cheaper MR-EFTR-A adapter is an ordinary adapter sans control ring and supports only automatic exposure, auto aperture, and autofocus. The pricier, though still just $40 version includes a control ring and adds image stabilization support in EXIF transmission. Ricoh may not show its new lens actually mounted to a Canon EOS R series mirrorless camera, but it's very clear what the goal is here, and it will be fascinating to see how this strategy is received by other lens makers and by Canon itself. And I thought this was a clever way for Ricoh to get around those restrictions imposed by Canon. I still think it's silly myself that Canon has been doing that, but I understand that they're trying to sell more of their full-frame autofocus lenses for the EOS R architecture, their newer mirrorless cameras. But still, everybody else allows fully autofocus lenses for their mirrorless cameras to be made by third-party lens makers. So maybe someday Canon will relent, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Remember to check out the Liam Photography Podcast Facebook group. It is a private group, and you must answer a security question to join, which is the name of the host of the show, myself, Liam. And I've also opened it up to allow you to give the name of a previous guest on the show to show that you're a listener. Once you are in the group, you are free to post your own original work. Additionally, I am the admin of the Fujifilm GFX 50R group, which is the largest group for the 50R on Facebook. If you own or plan to own the 50R, you can request to join that group. You can find my work at liamphotography.net and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at liamphotoatl. If you like abandoned buildings and history, you can find my project at forgottenpiecesofgeorgia.com. All right, that's going to wrap up episode 488 of the Liam Photography Podcast. I want to thank all of my listeners once again for subscribing, rating, and reviewing us in Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you might be listening to your podcast. If you're not currently a subscriber, why not? It doesn't cost you anything but a second of your time to smash that subscribe button. So do it now, please, as well as sharing the show out on social media and elsewhere with your photography friends and ask them to give it a subscribe and a listen. I also wanted to remind you to check out the Liam Photography YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel, turn on all notifications. The channel has gotten up to almost 80,000 subscribers, and once again, I appreciate all of you for your continued support, and hopefully we'll hit 100,000 in the first quarter of 2026. We'll have to wait and see. And as I've promised before, when we do hit 100,000 subscribers, I will have another giveaway, a bit bigger of a giveaway than with the one we had for the 50,000 subscriber target. All right, I will see you all again next Thursday.